It was supposed to be one last hurrah, one final adventure before life pulled us all in different directions. College, jobs, responsibilities. Those were the things waiting for us at the end of the summer. But for this weekend, we were free. No parents, no rules, just 9 friends out in the middle of nowhere with nothing but the woods, a camper, and a cooler full of beer to keep us company. The idea was Jess's, naturally. She was always the one with the crazy ideas, and this was no exception. "I know this spot," she'd said, her eyes bright with excitement as she described a remote campsite she'd stumbled across online. It was far from civilization, surrounded by dense forest, and best of all, completely deserted. Perfect for underage drinking, a bonfire, and making memories that would last a lifetime. Everyone was on board immediately, everyone except me. It wasn't that I didn't want to go, I did, but I wasn't in the right headspace. 2 weeks ago, Maya and I had called it quits, and the last thing I wanted was to be the 9th wheel, the single guy tagging along with a bunch of couples. It was a recipe for misery, and they all knew it. But they were my friends and they didn't want to leave me behind. "Come on, Quentin," Tommy had said, clapping me on the back. "You need this. We'll have a blast, I promise." "Yeah, man," Caleb had added. "It won't be the same without you." I knew what they were doing, trying to cheer me up, trying to get me out of my funk. I appreciated it. I really did. But I couldn't shake the feeling that this trip was a mistake. Something about it just didn't sit right with me. Maybe it was the thought of spending a weekend in the woods without Maya. Maybe it was the idea of being stuck in close quarters with a bunch of couples. Or maybe it was something else. Something deeper. Something darker that I couldn't quite put my finger on. But I went along with it anyway. What choice did I have? I didn't want to be the killjoy, the one who ruined everyone else's fun because I couldn't get over my breakup. So, I packed my bag, climbed into the camper with the others, and tried to force a smile as we drove off into the unknown. The trip out there was rough. The camper, which belonged to Jess's parents, was old and beat up, and the road was little more than a narrow dirt path winding through the woods. Every bump and pothole sent us bouncing in our seats, and more than once, I thought we were going to get stuck. But we didn't, and after what felt like hours, we finally reached the campsite. It wasn't what I'd expected. The clearing was overgrown, the grass tall and unkempt, the trees pressing in from all sides like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of pine and earth, and there was a stillness to the place that set my nerves on edge. But it wasn't just the isolation that bothered me. It was the other campsites. There were several of them, scattered around the clearing, but they weren't in use. They were abandoned, left behind as if their occupants had fled in a hurry. Tents lay collapsed, belongings scattered, fire pits filled with ashes long cold. It was as if someone had dropped everything and run, leaving behind only the ghost of their presence. "This place is weird," I said, trying to keep the unease out of my voice. "Maybe we should find somewhere else." Jess shrugged, clearly unconcerned. "It's remote, yeah, but that's the point. No one's gonna bother us out here." "Or hear us scream," Ryan joked, earning a nervous laugh from the others. "I don't know," Caleb said, echoing my thoughts. "This place feels off." "Come on, guys," Leah chimed in, always the voice of reason. "It's just an old campsite. People probably left in a hurry because of the weather or something. We've already come this far. We might as well stay." There was some grumbling, but in the end, everyone agreed. It wasn't like we had another option. We hadn't scouted any other sites, and finding another spot this remote on short notice was unlikely. Plus, there was the matter of the booze and weed we'd brought with us. Out here, we were safe from prying eyes and nosy park rangers. So we unpacked, setting up the camper in the middle of the clearing and pitching tents around it. I set up my tent on the outskirts of the camp, far enough from the others to give them their privacy, but close enough that I didn't feel completely isolated. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than nothing. As the sun dipped below the horizon, We gathered around the fire pit, cracking open beers and passing around joints, the tension from earlier melting away in the warm glow of the flames. The sky above was a deep, inky black, the stars brighter than I'd ever seen them, and for a little while, I let myself relax. The sound of laughter, the smell of wood smoke, the buzz of alcohol in my veins. It was almost enough to make me forget about Maya, about the nagging sense of dread that had been gnawing at me since we arrived. Almost. We stayed up late, telling ghost stories and urban legends, the kind of stuff that seemed appropriate for a night like this. Ryan told a particularly creepy one about a serial killer who used to haunt these very woods, stalking campers and hitchhikers, leaving their bodies to be found by the next unlucky group to stumble across his hunting ground. It was the kind of story that would have freaked me out when I was younger, but now it just felt like a way to pass the time. I wasn't scared. Not of that anyway. What bothered me was the silence that followed after the stories were done, the way the night seemed to close in around us, the shadows deepening as the fire burned low. We all retreated to our tents eventually, the fire reduced to glowing embers, the cold creeping in as the night wore on. I climbed into my sleeping bag, listening to the distant sounds of the others settling down, the rustle of nylon and the murmur of voices as couples whispered to each other in the dark. I was alone with my thoughts, the silence pressing down on me like a weight. I don't know when I fell asleep, but when I woke up, it was still dark. The kind of darkness that feels thick and suffocating, like a living thing. The air was cold, the kind of cold that bites at your skin and seeps into your bones, and for a moment, I wasn't sure where I was. Then the memories came flooding back. The campsite, the abandoned tents, the uneasy feeling that had settled over me like a shroud. I lay there, listening to the night, my breath coming in shallow gasps. Something was wrong. I couldn't put my finger on it, but I knew it in my gut. The air was too still, the silence too absolute. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting. Then I heard it. A voice, faint and distant, calling out from the woods. "Help me." My blood ran cold. The voice was soft, almost a whisper, but it was there, drifting through the trees like a ghost. "Help me, please." I sat up, my heart pounding in my chest, straining to hear. The voice came again, clearer this time, closer. "Someone, please help." It sounded like a woman, her voice tinged with desperation, with fear. My first instinct was to get up, to go to her. But something held me back. Something about the way the voice echoed through the trees, the way it seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once made my skin crawl. I wasn't the only one who heard it. I heard rustling from the other tents, the murmur of voices as the others woke up, confused and alarmed. "What the hell was that?" Tommy's voice, sharp with fear. "Did you hear that?" Leah, her voice trembling. "Someone's out there," Jess said, her voice hushed. "We should go check it out," Ashley suggested, always the brave one. "No way," Caleb's voice was firm, steady. "Something's not right about this." He was right. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to stay put, to not leave the safety of the tent. But then the voice came again, closer, more desperate. "Please, someone." "We can't just leave her out there," Ryan said, already unzipping his tent. "Wait," I said, my voice shaking. "Something's off about this. We should stay together, stay by the fire." There was a moment of hesitation, a collective uncertainty hanging in the air. Then the voice came again, even closer. "Help me, please." That was all it took. Ryan and Ashley were already on their feet, moving toward the edge of the clearing. The others followed, reluctant but unwilling to abandon someone who might be in danger. I was the last to leave the tent, my legs trembling as I stepped out into the cold night air. We gathered around the fire, the embers casting flickering shadows across the clearing. The voice had gone silent, leaving only the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. "What now?" Jess asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. "We wait," Caleb said, his eyes scanning the darkness. "If someone's out there, they'll find us." But no one came. We stood there for what felt like hours, our breaths fogging in the cold air, our eyes straining to see into the woods. But the voice didn't return, and slowly, reluctantly, we made our way back to our tents. I didn't sleep that night. I lay awake, staring at the canvas above me, every sound amplified in the darkness. I was sure I could hear something moving outside, something creeping around the edge of the clearing, just beyond the reach of the firelight. But every time I looked, there was nothing there. The second-day morning came, bringing with it a sense of relief. The sun was shining, the sky was clear, and the events of the night before seemed like a bad dream. We tried to shake it off, telling ourselves it was just a trick of the wind, a figment of our imaginations. We spent the day exploring, hiking through the woods, fishing in the river, trying to enjoy what little time we had left together. But the unease lingered, a shadow that followed us wherever we went. The others tried to ignore it, tried to act like everything was normal, but I could see the tension in their eyes, the way they glanced over their shoulders, as if expecting something to leap out of the trees at any moment. That night, we gathered around the fire again, but the mood was different. The laughter was forced, the conversation stilted. No one mentioned the voice from the night before, but it was clear that we were all thinking about it. The forest seemed darker, the shadows deeper, the night colder. As the fire burned low, we retreated to our tents, the silence heavy and oppressive. I crawled into my sleeping bag, my body tense, my mind racing. I wanted to believe that we were safe, that whatever had happened the night before was just a fluke. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was out there, watching us, waiting. Then the voice came again. "Help me." My heart stopped. It was the same voice, the same desperate plea, drifting through the trees like a phantom. "Please, someone." This time there was no hesitation. I grabbed my flashlight, unzipped my tent, and stepped out into the night. The others were already awake, already on edge. "Did you hear that?" Jess asked, her voice trembling. "We need to go," Caleb said, his voice urgent. "Now." But it was too late. The voice was closer now, right at the edge of the clearing. "Help me." We all froze, our eyes locked on the darkness, our breaths coming in short, shallow gasps. Then, slowly, a figure emerged from the trees. It was a woman, her clothes torn and dirty, her hair matted with leaves and twigs. She stumbled into the clearing, her eyes wide with fear. "Please, help me." Ryan was the first to move, rushing toward her. "It's okay," he said, his voice soothing. "We're here to help." But something was wrong. The way she moved, the way her eyes darted around, it wasn't right. Then I saw it. Her eyes. They were empty, hollow, like she was looking right through us. Before I could react, she lunged at Ryan, her mouth twisted into a snarl. He screamed, but it was cut short as she tackled him to the ground, her hands clawing at his throat. The others reacted in a frenzy, scrambling to pull her off him, but she was strong, too strong for someone her size. I stood there, frozen, my mind unable to process what was happening. Then, with a sickening crack, she snapped Ryan's neck. Chaos erupted. Everyone was shouting, screaming, trying to get away. The woman, if she was even a woman, stood up, her head jerking unnaturally as she turned to face us. Her eyes were wrong, her movements jerky, like a puppet on strings. I backed away, my heart pounding in my chest. The others were running, but there was nowhere to go. The darkness closed in around us, and I could hear voices, more voices, calling out from the woods, echoing through the trees. I turned and ran, my legs pumping, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The forest was a blur around me, the trees whipping past as I fled deeper into the woods. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care. All I knew was that I had to get away, had to escape. But the voices followed, whispering, taunting, luring me deeper into the dark. The next few days were a nightmare. We were trapped, hunted, one by one picked off by whatever was out there. The voices were relentless, mimicking our friends, luring us into the woods where the doppelgangers waited. Tommy and Leah went missing first. We found them the next day, torn apart, their bodies mutilated beyond recognition. It wasn't an animal that had done it. It was something else. Something cruel. Something that enjoyed the pain it inflicted. Maria and Taylor were next. They were found in the river, their bodies bloated and lifeless, their faces frozen in expressions of terror. Whatever was hunting us was playing with us, toying with us, savoring our fear. By the fourth day, there were only 4 of us left: Caleb, Jess, Ashley, and me. We were exhausted, terrified, on the verge of collapse. We knew we had to leave, had to find help, but we were deep in the woods with no cell service, no vehicle, and no idea where we were. We decided to walk out, to follow the river downstream, and hope that it led to civilization. It was a desperate plan, but it was all we had. We set out at dawn, the sky overcast, the air thick with the promise of rain. The forest was silent, too silent. The only sound the crunch of leaves underfoot and the distant rush of the river. We walked for hours, our nerves frayed, our bodies aching. Every snap of a twig, every rustle of leaves sent us into a panic, convinced that the voices were back, that the doppelgangers were coming for us. And then they did. It happened so fast. One moment we were walking, the next we were running, the voices all around us, the figures emerging from the trees, their eyes empty, their mouths twisted into cruel smiles. Caleb was the first to fall, dragged into the underbrush by a figure that looked like Leah, her hands clawing at his face, her mouth opening impossibly wide. Jess and Ashley screamed, their voices lost in the chaos, as they were pulled down by figures that looked like Tommy and Maria. I ran, the voices chasing me, the figures close behind. My lungs burned. My legs felt like they were on fire. But I didn't stop. I couldn't stop. I had to survive. I stumbled into a clearing, my breath ragged, my vision blurred. I could see something in the distance, a building, a light, a ranger station. I ran toward it, my body screaming in protest, my mind numb with fear. The voices were right behind me, the figures closing in, their hands reaching for me, their whispers filling my ears. I reached the door, slamming it behind me, my body collapsing against the wall as I gasped for air. The figures were outside, their faces pressed against the windows, their eyes empty, their mouths moving soundlessly. I was safe, for now. The Rangers found me huddled in the corner, my body shaking, my mind barely clinging to sanity. They took me in, gave me medical attention, and listened as I told them what had happened. I could see the disbelief in their eyes, the way they glanced at each other, their expressions unreadable. When I finished, the room was silent. The Rangers exchanged looks. Then one of them stepped forward, his face serious. "You're safe now," he said, his voice calm. "But you need to know something. What you saw out there, no one will believe you. It's better if you don't talk about it, for your own good." I wanted to argue, to scream, to make them understand, but I was too exhausted, too broken. I nodded numbly, letting them lead me to a bed where I passed out from sheer exhaustion. When I woke up, I was in a hospital, the bright lights burning into my eyes. I was alone at first, my mind foggy, my body weak. But then the door opened, and several men in black suits walked in, their faces expressionless. They didn't introduce themselves. didn't offer any explanations. They just started asking questions. Cold, clinical questions about what I'd seen, what had happened, what I remembered. I answered as best I could, my voice trembling, my mind racing. But no matter what I said, their faces remained blank, their eyes devoid of any emotion. When I finished, they just stood there, staring at me. Then one of them spoke, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "If you ever want a future," he said, his words chilling me to the core, "you'll never speak of this again. Understand?" I nodded, my heart pounding in my chest. They didn't wait for a response. They just turned and left, leaving me alone with my thoughts, my fears, and the knowledge that my life would never be the same. The news broke the next morning. The story was everywhere. On the TV, on the radio, all over the internet. 9 teenagers went camping in the woods, the headlines screamed, and only one survived. The official report was a nightmare of lies, a twisted version of what really happened. They said we had been drinking and smoking weed laced with LSD and PCP, that we had lost our minds, turned on each other in a drug-fueled frenzy. They said we had killed each other in the woods, that the horrors we experienced were nothing more than hallucinations brought on by our own recklessness. They painted us as drug-addled kids who paid the ultimate price for our stupidity, and the world believed it. Why wouldn't they? It was easier to believe that we were the architects of our own destruction than to accept the truth. Something out there was hunting us, something not human. I watched the news reports in silence, my stomach turning with every lie they spewed. My friends weren't drug addicts. We weren't reckless. We were just kids, out for one last trip before life tore us apart. But now they were all gone, their memories twisted and defiled by the lies being fed to the world. The worst part? I couldn't do anything about it. The men in black had made it clear. I was to keep my mouth shut if I wanted to live a normal life. If I ever spoke the truth, they would destroy me, just like they destroyed the truth. So I stayed silent. I watched as the story spread, as my friends were buried with the lies, and I said nothing. My own parents looked at me with a mix of pity and disappointment, believing the story they'd been fed. I was the pariah, the outcast, the one who survived when the others didn't. Everyone in town whispered behind my back, their eyes full of suspicion and contempt. No one asked me what really happened, and I didn't offer to tell. Eventually, I couldn't take it anymore. The stares, the whispers, the constant reminder of what I'd lost. It was too much. I packed up what little I had left and left town, moving far away where no one knew who I was or what had happened. I found a small town in the middle of nowhere, started over, and tried to forget. But the truth is, I can't forget. I can't forget the voices, the figures that looked like my friends, the way they tore us apart one by one. I can't forget the terror, the way the forest seemed to close in around us, the way the darkness seemed to swallow us whole. I can't forget that I survived when they didn't, and I can't forget the warning the men in black gave me. So I live in silence, haunted by the memories, knowing that I can never speak the truth. The world believes the lie, and I'm the only one who knows what really happened out there. Sometimes I think about going back, about finding out what really killed my friends. But then, I remember the cold, dead eyes of those doppelgangers, the way they mimicked our voices, our faces, our lives, and I know I can never go back. I've made a new life for myself, far away from the memories, far away from the lies. But every now and then, when I close my eyes, I see them, the figures in the woods, the eyes watching me from the darkness, the voices calling my name. And I know that no matter how far I run, no matter how hard I try to forget, the truth will always be with me, lurking in the shadows, waiting. Because some things can't be buried, some truths can't be hidden, no matter how deep you try to bury them. And sometimes, I wonder if they're still out there, waiting for the next group of kids to stumble into their hunting grounds, waiting to play their twisted game all over again. But I'll never know, because I'll never go back.